Welcome to the Brainz Magazine podcast, a podcast with in-depth interviews and conversations with world-class entrepreneurs, expert coaches, industry leaders, and international celebrities. Get exclusive insight into the world of business, mindset, leadership, and lifestyle with your host, Mark Sefton.
I want to welcome you to the next episode of the Brainz Magazine podcast, and today we're speaking with Brianna Anderson. Bri is a somatic experiencing practitioner. How are you today, Bri?
I'm lovely. How are you, Mark?
Doing well. I'm doing well. I almost nearly said it's Friday. It isn't, but it feels like it. It feels like we're at the end of a week. It's been a good week, but like all weeks, you always feel it, don't you, towards the end?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I was
So,
going to ask you, I just introduced you as a somatic experiencing practitioner. Now, I think my first question there is what does that mean exactly? And I keep hearing this word somatic, and sometimes I think it's really helpful that we actually just define what that is, because there's certain words that you may use because they're in your everyday, but for other people they don't have a Scooby-Doo. And actually, I
mhm.
think it's really important. So, what is a somatic experiencing practitioner, and what does somatic mean?
I love that we're starting right here. This is a great spot. So, somatic and the prefix of the word soma means body. So, somatic is a body-oriented. Um, Experiencing is basically experiencing the body. And so, somatic experiencing practitioners are I don't know if you're familiar with Peter Levine, but he has three PhDs, and he basically um, didn't understand why humans held on to stress and trauma in their body.
Hmm.
Um, but yet he would see animals under more stress and attack, and they would naturally go back into like a resting state, but humans didn't. So he basically did his life's journey and work to figure out how to resolve stress and trauma from the body. So somatic experiencing is a way to help the body and the being, the human, to um, resolve the stress that it's holding onto and the traumatic symptoms that humans get stuck in. So
Hmm.
that is essentially what somatic experiencing practitioners support people in doing, but I'm sure that just gave you 1,000 more questions.
Well, the first one was to do with Peter Levine. I was thinking, I'm sure he's probably not related to Adam Levine of Maroon 5. But
No,
that,
he's not.
but that would
Definitely
be
not.
quite funny if it was.
It would
Um,
be. Yeah.
no, I like that you've captured that because it totally, I think it just brings clarity to the rest of the conversation that we have. I always find it really interesting because I love wildlife as well. Like my favorite animal is a lion, and when it attacks a zebra and it's a near miss, you see the zebra like shake off and shake
Yes.
out the experience, and how, you know, within that, like that's why exercise is so good when you're anxious, because you're releasing that tension in the body,
Mhm.
which is pretty much, what you're saying, isn't it? That the fact that we have an experience, but then we store it as human beings, right? Rather than, so we all need to go to the Masai Mara right now, go watch wildlife, go and observe how they deal with stress.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's actually our social structure as humans and our prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain, which gives us that analytical thinking that animals don't have, that inhibits, we suppress, we inhibit, we'll brace, we'll fall and hit our head, but we want to get up immediately to make it look like we're okay, around the other humans. And we don't actually let our body go through the process. That shaking that the zebra does, it's actually not, it's a autonomic response. And so in somatic experiencing, in working with trauma, that is where the trauma gets kind of discharged or deactivated. So, as a practitioner, we are trained to help support people's systems to being able to do that, which is tricky and really fabulous.
You say zebra, I say zebra.
I know. I wanted to laugh when I heard you say it.
You can laugh. I mean, we have some right differences, and some of them, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I won't even get in a battle with you about some of the pronunciations of words because some of them are like it could be a totally different word.
Totally. I'm
But
all curious now. I want to know what some of those
well,
tomato
I'll
tomato.
share one. One of them is aluminium because you
Oh,
guys call it
aluminum.
aluminum. I mean,
Aluminum.
that's like totally different.
Yes, it is.
So that's wild.
Aluminium.
Aluminium.
Aluminium. It's almost
Yeah.
like you add a syllable in there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, aluminum
sounds
just sounds like a premium balloon to me.
like aluminium. I don't know. It sounds like it should be on the, I mean, periodic table, but yeah.
Right. Let, let's go back to somatics, right, sir?
Yes, definitely.
How are you helping people resolve trauma and energy blocks through the work that you do? Because I think it's really fascinating. We're hearing more and more about trauma. There's more and more of us looking at healing. I'm fascinated because everything's energy, but this idea that we can actually have blocks within our mind, but also in our body. How are you helping people resolve those?
Yeah. Keep me on track because I'm going to go a little sideways, possibly with the answering this question. So, first off, I want to just say our brain has our spinal column and then all of our nerves, right? So, our brain is our body and our body is our brain. So, any type of unconscious beliefs that we have, that also is going to show up in the body. It's going to show up in our um, body language. So in order to do this work, it's really important for there to be a mind-body connection. And you have to be able to track and be with the sensations that you feel in the body, right? So, for instance, when you get really angry, right? Some people want to fight or want to scream or want to throw something, right? There's a physiological impulse. Now, in society, we're not supposed to do things like that, right? Um, but so what happens is we thwart that impulse, we push it down into the body. So as a child, let's say there's a parent who gets in the child's face. Let's say the dad's like a raging alcoholic and screams at him, and the boy is like backed up against the wall and he has all these impulses, right? He wants to yell back, he wants to fight, he wants to run away. He has all of these impulses that if he follows through with, potentially will cause more harm to him, right? If he started yelling back at his dad might hit him. So he thwarts that energy inside of him. So in doing this work, um, we would work with like context. Sometimes we'd work with the event, or sometimes not at all. You don't even necessarily need to because it's alive within somebody still. It's alive within their body. So as a practitioner, I would be helping them to stay with the sensations that they're feeling in their body. So their mind has to have the discipline and the focus to stay with the sensation, follow the impulse, and then allow their system to express what didn't get to be expressed, or to repair a boundary or complete something that didn't get completed, right? So that could be really feeling the anger because the boy probably pushed the anger down so much that he didn't feel it. And then as he got older, it would come out sideways, right? So that's kind of how people, or one example of how people can get into a unhealthy relationship with anger, and how, you know, they get drunk and then they get really angry, right? Or like
Mm,
in other circumstances, it
mm,
builds up and then explode.
mm.
So I hope I answered your question.
You did. What's a healthy way then, Bree, to express that anger? You know, you talked about the sensation, following the impulse, allow a system to express itself. How do we do that in a way that doesn't result in more issues and situations?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So, you know, there's a lot of different ways to work with anger. In a particular situation where you're working with a client, right, and you're helping them resolve anger that's trapped in the body, because people can take like a kickboxing class, right? Depending on their nervous system, depending on their epigenetics, right, their biological DNA tendency, the kickboxing class can either exacerbate their issues with anger or it can help them to work through it. So I don't feel comfortable giving like a whole slew because people just kind of have to figure it out on their own. But in a session, you really slow it down and somebody like they'll start feeling the anger like in their chest and I have them sit with it and sit with it and then they'll notice like their hands are in their lap but their hands start wanting to tense up and you can start to see as the practitioner and as the client feeling like there's more heat moving down their left side of their arm, right? And then like you can see their eyes start to tense up. So if it's done in a very, very slow, titrated, kind of controlled way, it allows the system to metabolize the anger that they have been um, that they suppress so much that it's really kind of offline, right? It's
Mm,
kind of like in their unconscious. So we allow it to come back online and then express it in a way where they, feel that it's healthy. People can sometimes want to push. So I'll meet their hand, right? And slowly have them feel all of the musculature and the emotion that comes on, and it has to happen simultaneously. So in a lot of not a lot of, but there's another form of working with emotions and intensity in the body, and that's any type of catharsis work,
mm.
where people just start screaming and raging, right? But that oftentimes comes from the mind. It's not coming from the body, right?
Right.
So the work is about allowing the body to express what it needs to express. And as the body leads, the emotions come online, memories will come back online. They might want to say certain words, like that boy might want to say like fuck you, get away from me, right? Like stop this, or so in the expression sometimes a memory will come out, or you'll hear internally like fuck you or get off of me, things such as like that, like a
Mm,
lot of rape victims will
mm.
have words that come up in their consciousness through the expression because it's actually coming out of the body. But it's again, like I said, the brain is in the body too. So
Yeah, makes sense. And it's really interesting how we're doing a lot of work, I think, where, we're getting people to feel first and become comfortable with feeling and not to be afraid of what they feel, because that's where it really starts. It's acknowledging, that's really the first step. And as we have the sensation, we're acknowledging and we're tagging and we're realizing this is what I feel, and we become more acquainted. I mean, that's what emotional intelligence is, isn't it? Is to know what emotion it is and why it's there.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, something that I wanted to ask you, you've been studying healing for 20 years, right? Which is an incredible amount of time. Do you, Bree, still have healing to do yourself? And do we ever really reach a point where we're completely healed?
I love this question. I think that our beliefs govern how we move through life and how we move through the world. So, certain people, I mean, not certain people, we all have perceptions around ourselves and around healing and around who we're becoming. So, some people can get stuck thinking that they have to keep working on themselves when maybe their healing is to learn how to be playful, right? Like, so let me back up a little bit. I would say that I still do have a little bit of healing left. Um, I have massive, I mean, I was born with bilateral hip dysplasia, wasn't detected, meaning both of my hips were dislocated at birth. And I walked for 2.5 years before I had my first surgery. I had 10 major reconstructive hip surgeries from 3.5 to 11. And in that window of time, I spent almost 6 years in a full body cast. So my trauma was medical surgical trauma, but that affected how my physical body developed, right? So I walked with a severe limp, and I accrued, not just that trauma, but like I didn't fit in the world. People made fun of me, right? I grew up in a beach town where I'm in a bathing suit and compared my body to everybody else, like it goes on and on and on. Like boys weren't interested in me, right? So, and then on top of that, my parents divorced, and like it just the first 2 decades of my life were kind of a little intense. So, I am currently working with a physical therapist who's a body worker, and she does myofascial release. So I have a lot of scar tissue because my hips were cut into over and over again. And so that's actually affected a little bit of my spine and my neck too. So in a sense of like trauma, no, I don't have, I'm not my life and the way that I feel inside myself and in the world is drastically changed. And that's because I've worked through and then moved through the threshold onto the other side. And my life is light and playful and fun and carefree. I feel very free in my world. And people who have trauma don't feel that way. They feel isolated, depressed, anxious, heavy in their body. They're battling with like negative headspaces. They have reoccurring experiences that happen over and over that mirror some of their trauma. So I'm not experiencing any of that, but my body could be more aligned. So I do look at it like there's room for improvement. And one of my legs is a little bit shorter than the other, due to how the surgery is fixed out. So I'm always going to have a structural misalignment. So for me, it's more maintenance, and
Mm,
it's more of a curiosity, like how far can the scar tissue around my hips melt, right? And how would
mm,
that change my body?
mm,
This is my life is healing and goals and seeing what's possible. So I'm I feel like that answered your question.
mm.
It was multiple answers, but yeah, yeah. So do people ever fully heal? Um, I think that people can fully get to the other side of their trauma and not have trauma symptoms. I believe that humans are moldable, and we're always changing and growing and evolving, or we're stuck, right? And
Mm.
so I think that healing can look like growing. It just depends on people's mindset and their perception. But I do believe that, yes, people can get fully to the other side. And once you have an injury, right? If you like a trauma, but if you have a sports injury, right, and you hurt your knee or your low back, that knee probably is going to be a little bit more sensitive the rest of your life. So
Mm,
you're more prone to an injury. So you could be more prone to certain types of conditions that would mirror the trauma that you had,
mm,
right? So
mm,
you'll have sensitive triggers that you can continue to strengthen, but there's still something that we have to watch out for. So,
mm. One thing that I just want to touch on, I've got to try and express it in a way that you understand it so that I get a little bit more depth and meat. At the very start, you said sometimes it's not so much about the healing, maybe it's about having or being a little more playful.
mhm.
I find that interesting. I kind of want you to kind of go a little deeper on that that point because I think it's so interesting when if we just take like a physical situation where we've got an injury or a wound and obviously we want to bring healing to it so we may clean it and we may be attentive to it. It seems like there's another way to bring healing to that isn't as obvious. And I kind of just want you to tap into what you really meant by maybe it's we need to be more playful.
Sure. So just interrupt me or ask another question if you feel the impulse to do so, right? All
Yeah.
right, or to like hone me in. But I think that oftentimes when people experience trauma or their life is filled with pain and suffering,
Mm,
um, they are so immersed in it,
mm,
they're breathe every breath, they're breathing it, they're
mm,
thinking it, they're
mm,
drowning in it,
mm,
right?
mm,
And so um that they're consumed by it.
mm,
Part of healing is to, I mean, the desire is to get out of that, right? The desire is um, to not be in that. And that looks different per person, but really it's a sense of feeling light or free or happy or peaceful, right? Like
mm,
people who have anxiety, they want to feel peaceful and
mm,
relaxed. So, it's hard to move into that space if you're carrying so much density within you, so
mm,
much pain and suffering. But once you start to move away from that and it starts to resolve within you, um, and things start to shift and you feel different inside, your life naturally starts to change. And one of the ways to um, expedite the healing is to start focusing on what feels good. And I mean that literally like right in this moment. Like, is your chair comfortable? Right? Like, can you make yourself even more comfortable in this moment? Can you move towards something that feels a little bit more nicer or pleasurable? Right? And so developing the awareness and the skill set to ask yourself these questions. Like, what do I really like? We get stuck in this rat race of I've got to accomplish all these things or check these things off my list and da 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 da. But we're not asking ourselves, what's the most enjoyable way that I could do this right now? You
mm,
know?
mm,
Like we get in the car and we're like going and we answer the phone and we da 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 da. And it's like, wait a minute, I have like 10 minutes to drive somewhere.
mm,
And this could be so enjoyable,
mm,
right? Like
mm,
I want to have the windows down? Like what would make this a really enjoyable experience for
mm,
myself?
mm,
And so if we can ask ourselves questions like that, we start
mm,
moving further and further away from pain and suffering
mm,
and into the space that we want to be in.
mm.
And that's something that we all can do.
Love it. Yeah, you
Yeah.
didn't need to be reined in. You needed to be let off the leash, breather. That was I love when we look at something through the back door there's so many people that talk about the things that are really, for me, really evident because we hear about it. You know, we do the obvious, we use common sense, but I love getting a result that comes from something that isn't necessarily obvious. It's opposing it in the opposite spirit, in the opposite energy. I really like that. So that was fantastic. What has been the most valuable exercise that you have done in your own healing that you feel if we did one thing to bring about more healing in our own life, what would that be?
Hmm. Um, is this an exercise that I can offer people, or this is just my own experience?
This can be whatever you feel is the most
Because really,
helpful.
really, I feel like what I just shared is probably the best thing that um, listeners can take away from,
Mm,
for sure, for sure, for
mm,
sure. I would say along my journey,
mm,
um, that was definitely pivotal. I would also say that it's less of an exercise and more of a skill. I mean, it's both, but it develops a skill. And we humans, I mean, if you think back like 100, 200, 300 years, like how challenging life was. It still is challenging. It changes. The challenge changes. But like you could like just kill anybody whenever you wanted,
mm,
like you can't do that now. I mean, you can, but there's repercussions as where back then it was a lot different. And so the amount of stress that people were under, um, it changes it changes your nervous system and it changes and affects the DNA. So we literally are all of us have mutated genes and mutated DNA, and it has forced us to be more disconnected from our body and
mm,
more in our head. Um, and so the exercise or the skill that was most important for me was to really pause and slow down
mm,
and to just ask, like, not even ask, I mean, just focus on my body,
mm,
just to like kind of take an assessment of like what is happening inside of me right now,
mm,
right? Is my heart beating fast? Is my back hurting? Is what's happening? And just to get curious.
mm,
And so we don't do that. We don't tend to our bodies, I think, collectively as a whole.
mm,
And so if we can learn to do that, and actually get curious about what our body's experiencing, right? Not just our mind, it might be easier to change how we're thinking,
mm,
right? Might be
mm,
easier to shift out of some negative headspaces,
mm,
and actually develop more self-love and more self-compassion,
mm,
instead of telling ourselves we need to do this, we need to do this, da, 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 I'm not doing this. Well, you're not, because you're in your head.
mm,
You can just pause and get curious about like what is actually happening right here, right now with my
mm,
body.
mm,
That action alone develops self-love, right? It's a skill set where we're tending to and taking care of ourselves instead of talking to ourselves in our head.
mm. I love that. I've just been reading Wim Hof's book,
Oh,
Method, which obviously is all about breathing, the cold showers. Obviously, it's a lot about resetting and regulating your nervous system. But I wanted to ask you, Bree, from your point of view, what is the most effective way we can reset our nervous system?
well, everybody's nervous system's different.
Okay.
And it's different per day a little bit,
Mm,
like we all have specific nervous system patterns. So people who have more shame or people who are anxious have a very, very different nervous system, right? Shame is like a collapse. And, anxiety is obviously super wiry, I am a big, big believer in breath work. I'm trained in biodynamic breath work and trauma release. It's different than Wim Hof's method. I feel like his method is really good for some people and for some nervous systems and re-traumatizing for others. So that's just, with everything and nothing against him. It's with every single offering out there. But I think the best way to reset our nervous system is first to just start to develop a uh, relationship with your body, to get curious about what's happening right here, right now, in the moment. So I think the exercise that I just shared
Mm,
is important because a lot of people, they're on social media, they're scrolling, they're reading about fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and somebody words it in a particular way, and they're like, "That's me," right? So they're experiencing a part of themselves, right,
mm,
through somebody else's words, which is great for the mind.
mm,
But they're not necessarily experiencing and aware exactly how they move into freeze or how they start to move out of freeze, right?
mm, mm,
Or people who are anxious, right? Like there's so many different types of anxiety. Like some is very situational. Some people get anxiety and they don't even know what the circumstances are, what's triggering it, and that's
mm,
really, really frustrating and
mm,
challenging. But if people can start to become aware, like they usually know by now, like, oh yeah, I have depression or I have anxiety or I have this. But if they can start to witness how they move into that state and how they start to move out of that state, that awareness will bring them so much. It'll take them so far. So really, I think it's just developing the capacity and the skill set to um, have the discipline to take time to witness their body, but to really, really witness what's happening.
I love that.
Um, yeah.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, but I always like to leave a little room just for you to maybe share something intuitively that maybe we haven't touched on, or maybe something that you just feel is really important to communicate that's really, yeah, just on the tip of your tongue. Now's your chance.
You know, I don't really have anything to share. I do really well when I'm asked questions and I'm led. I think in this moment, I am just very grateful for the opportunity, and I really enjoyed this. And I didn't know what was going to come out of me, what I was going to say. And I think you asked some really great questions, and I just want to thank you. That's what's in my heart right now. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Bree, how do people find out more about you and your work? Where do we go to find out more?
So you can find my website's Healing with Bree, BRI. And that's where you can find you can read more about my history, my story, and about the type of trauma resolution work that I do. And the energy healing work that I do. I
Mm,
also offer I have a 12-week online program that's also there on the website, and it's called Ascend. It is about helping people to resolve body trauma.
mm,
So, and we didn't really touch on this, but there's all different types of trauma. There's people talk about complex PTSD, which is really a form of developmental trauma. Um, but I, my orientation towards working with trauma is body trauma. So there are it's a broad category, and there's two main categories. One is where something happened to the body, and that includes an array of things, right? So any type of attacks or medical surgical procedures or slips and falls, any car accidents, moving vehicle accidents, any type of sexual trauma or physical abuse. So that is like a big category where something happens to the body and the person feels changed or different after, and their body's holding the trauma from those experiences. The other category, which is like super near and dear to my heart, it's people's relationship with their body in relationship to the rest of the world. And so these people generally have something that is blatantly obvious about their body that is vastly different from everyone around them. So, meaning, somebody can, like, for instance, this is a great example, like the fat kid growing up, right? They can't escape their body. They can't lose weight. It's a big obsession for them, right? They're so immersed by it. And their body is different than everybody else around them, right? And so no matter where they go, they can't escape it. There's people who like are born with like one eye that's really big and then one is small. Or, people with, you know, they're born into a family, let's say, they're light skin and red hair, but they're born into, a Mexican family and they look vastly different. And so they don't fit in. And the world around them lets them know that they're different in multiple different ways. And so that is its own particular type of trauma. So those are the two categories that I work with, primarily. And I have a program that helps people to move through that. So
There you go. There was that intuition that you said that you had nothing to say other than thank you. And then there it is right there.
yeah, yeah. Right
Thank
there
you,
at the
Brie.
end.
Been really good. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you too, Mark.
Thank you for joining this episode with me, Mark Sefton. I hope you've really enjoyed it. Feel free to leave us a positive review on iTunes, and I look forward to welcoming you back to the next episode of the Brainz Magazine podcast.